And welcome to the briefing room. I'm Devin Dwyer, coming to you live from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and the G-20 summit here with John Carl, our chief White House correspondent. Great to have John. Ali Rogan, our White House reporter, with us. We're going to start, though, with some breaking news out of Alaska. As you may have seen, there is a major earthquake that just struck southern Alaska, the Anchorage area. Damage reports just coming in now. Seems to be very widespread. And joining us for a live update on what is happening at this moment is our friend Scott Centers from the ABC affiliate in Anchorage. Scott joins us by phone. Scott, are you okay? Give us a sense of the damage that you're seeing where you are.
Yeah, we're okay. I'm okay. My employees are all fine. We're actually, our building in and of itself sustained some minor damage. The corners around the roof, the bricks have fallen off. Right outside my doorway, a major water line that's underground broke. This happened at 8:30 this morning. The city's out here now. They've made their way here. Streets is flooded. Downtown, I've not been downtown yet, but we've got some damage that's occurred downtown that has been reported to be a little more extreme than what we've experienced here midtown. And I know out by the airport, which is probably about 5 miles from here, an off-ramp from the road. It's called International Boulevard. Is the off-ramp has collapsed. There's a picture that's floating around that has a picture of a car that fortunately didn't fall into the hole of the intersection that was created. Outside of that, we're experiencing aftershocks. They've kind of picked up. The time in between the aftershocks, we just experienced, two within about 3 minutes of each other. And so, outside of that, Scott, you've been a long time Alaska resident and no stranger to these earthquakes. They do happen frequently up in that part of the country, but how do you compare the one that just happened to previous ones you've been through before? Yeah, so this was absolutely, the largest one that I've experienced here in Anchorage. They right now have it at over a 7, but it was only 11 miles away, and that's the key. We have earthquakes all the time. We had one a couple of years ago that was a 7. But it was, probably 100 miles away, the epicenter. This one was only 11 miles away. It wasn't necessarily that deep. And not only did they feel that here in Anchorage, but as far as way as our ABC is telling up in Fairbanks as well, building was shaking. Nothing near what it was here in Anchorage. Yeah, this was a big one in comparison.
All right. A big one indeed. Scott Centers, ABC affiliate in Anchorage. Thank you so much for your reporting, Scott. We wish you and your family the best as you go through this disaster. And I want to bring in now Rich Briggs. He's a research geologist at the National Earthquake Center out in Colorado. He's tracking what's happening right now. Geologists hundreds of miles away can monitor the data. Let's bring in Rich by phone. Rich, put this earthquake into context for us, and what is the biggest danger now, the immediate danger these residents face going forward the next few hours?
Yeah, thanks. I can tell you what we know from the global network and from the great local network, the Alaska Earthquake Center information as well. This is the kind of earthquake that happens where two plates are colliding, and one of the plates is diving beneath the other one, and it's underneath Anchorage, and that subducting plate, we call it, is breaking apart. It's bending and twisting and contorting as it goes down into the earth. And so this earthquake was caused by that plate breaking at depth, and it was about 25 miles beneath Anchorage. And so that energy then comes up from below, almost directly below, and shakes the Cook Inlet, the basin that Anchorage sits on. So that's why the shaking is fairly severe and widespread.
All right, Rich Briggs at the National Earthquake Center in Colorado. Thanks for a primer on that, Rich. We know you'll continue to follow developments, and we know, guys, the president's following the developments of this earthquake unfolding right now in Alaska. He just tweeted a short time ago, hasn't tweeted much since he's been here, but he did tweet condolences to the victims of that earthquake, and we know that he'll be keeping a close eye on that.
And Sarah Sanders says he's been briefed on it. So,
she has. Yeah. She did say he's been briefed as well. He, you know, John, he's had a lot of things on his mind coming into this trip. It's a crazy one. One of the biggest, though, before this crisis was this bombshell development in the Russia investigation before he got here. The president was up early this morning tweeting about that.
He was tweeting before 7 a.m. this morning, local time, about that. And it was the kind of phraseology we don't often hear from presidents of the United States. He was talking about this Trump Tower deal that they were looking into pursuing, never actually inked during the campaign, it turns out. And he said that it was totally legal and pretty cool. Yeah. Which
very legal.
Yeah, very
cool.
legal. Yeah,
very
he was only
extremely
lightly. He tweeted. I think we have the tweet. He was only lightly looking at that building in Moscow.
But you know, all signs are that this. You know, Cohen is one thing that has really infuriated the president. If you remember his reaction the day that they raided Cohen's office, the day that the FBI raided his office, the president, by all accounts, was into a rage on this, and that's when you really saw his attacks on the special counsel enter an entirely new level. And I think you saw this now. He is. I mean, remember Michael Cohen? He's calling him, you know, basically not very smart and weak and a liar right now. But this is the guy. Not only, you know, we call him the fixer. He was the lawyer for a full decade. His office was right there, right around the corner from the president in Trump Tower. I mean,
saw everything.
I mean, from Donald Trump,
everything, heard everything. Part of every deal Donald Trump ever did.
Absolutely.
Let's bring in Jack Date, our justice reporter, who's been tracking the legal implications of this. To Jack, we've been parsing it, trying to break it down for people, the significance of this. Help us understand, as you've been digesting what Michael Cohen has been saying to Bob Mueller, what potential liability the president could face based on what Cohen is saying.
Well, if you look at the Cohen plea agreement, he's admitting that he was involved in this Trump Tower deal in Moscow all the way into June, well into the campaign, well after they said it was over and they weren't engaging in it. He lied to Congress about it. But if you set aside the specific legal implications that Cohen faces and that implicate Trump, there's a broader thing that the national security community looks at, which is that the president has publicly lied about this repeatedly, and the Russians knew he was lying. And this creates a situation where now they have leverage over him. And for really 2 years, the Russians have known that the president has had this lie out there and have known about it. So it creates a potential area of compromise for the president, which has broad national security implications, which are very concerning.
And we don't know, guys, what Robert Mueller is specifically looking at with this deal. There's a lot we don't know. But bottom line is he's zeroing in on the Trump Tower Moscow plan.
Yeah, I mean, you know, look, all signs are that the deal was never actually inked.
Right,
obviously,
the president said never did it. Zero money.
And I'm not, you know, and I think we can have a debate. I mean, I'm sure they will contest highly whether or not the president actually lied. I think there can be a Clintonian defense here, looking at his words, the tenses in his words, and what he was saying, and what constitutes actually, dealing with Russians, because it never actually met fruition. But here's the thing that we don't know. ABC reported yesterday that Cohen spent 70 hours answering questions from Robert Mueller and his team. 70 hours. Was it all about this Trump Tower deal? Was there, I mean, what else does he have?
Exactly. I think that's what the Trump administration, the Trump folks are going to be thinking about as this goes forward, is the fact that this indicates how wide-ranging the Mueller investigation could be, that his imprimatur goes very, very wide, and they don't exactly know where it begins or ends.
Man, at the center of all this, of course, Vladimir Putin of Russia arrived here today. I think we have a picture of that. He flew in here to Argentina just after the president canceled the summit that Vladimir Putin himself long sought. John, you've been doing some reporting today on, there's a lot of speculation out there as to precisely why the president canceled this meeting. He's always talked about his openness to confronting Vladimir Putin, being tough. caught a lot of people by surprise, but the White House is sticking to its talking point.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Dmitry Peskov was a guy that you both know. He's been Putin's, basically Putin's enforcer, spokesperson for longer than Michael Cohen was Donald Trump's. Okay, I mean, he goes back a long way. He is the his spokesperson, and he said that there was going to be a pull-aside meeting today.
Got everybody buzzing on again, off
everybody
again.
buzzing. We went back, all of us did, to the White House. The official line from the White House is that there is no pull-aside. But when you talk to officials, look, it's quite possible they may bump into each other. Who knows? Putin may go up to them, start a conversation. I mean, who knows?
And of course, when they bump into each other, friendly, polite conversation like, hey, let's talk about this Trump Tower situation. And Michael Cohen, I mean, the definition of bumping into one another, I think we've seen, can be very broad.
And the president leaning in a little bit, too. Here's what he had to say a short time ago about still wanting to meet with Vladimir Putin. He just said that inconvenient issue of the aggression against the Ukraine needs to get resolved first. Take a listen.
We're not happy about it. Nobody is. And hopefully they'll be able to settle it out soon, because we look forward to meeting with President Putin. But on the basis of what took place with respect to the ships and the sailors, that was the sole reason.
So,
I got to say, by the way, one thing about Donald Trump, he is, at least in our experience now, almost 2 years into the Trump presidency, he is not somebody who has a tendency to cancel meetings.
He never doesn't.
No.
I mean, this is highly unusual. That he would, his whole point is there should be dialogue. He, obviously
never caves to pressure from the public or from critics. Why would you meet with Vladimir Putin at a time like this? But
I mean, it's really this was an interesting one.
And the Russian Foreign Minister, Dmitry Lavrov, is already offering up the speculation that he may have canceled the meeting due to political considerations, not necessarily the Ukraine situation.
What political considerations might those be?
I mean, he's doing the prognosticating for us.
Yeah.
He's doing the analyst job.
Well, Putin did feel some love, though, guys, from another sort of controversial figure who is here at the G20, not a member of the G20, but did show up here. Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Take a look at this big bromance handshake that is going viral online right now between Vladimir Putin and MBS, as he is known. A little bit of love there for Putin. MBS, though, creating some big waves here, John. This is very unusual. It has been widely condemned by the West. Shows up here trying to turn the page on the Khashoggi affair. And it was weird seeing him at that family photo ostracized off to the side.
Yeah, it was really strange. And going back to the Putin, high five turned into handshake. I mean, what struck me about that amazing image is the smiles on their faces, particularly Putin. I mean, that is as big and that is as happy a look as I have ever seen on Putin's face. You just wonder what is going on in their minds. I mean, they've both been vilified over these developments, and you just, I mean, what is it like? Hey,
and they've got Trump fawning over them both as well. It's a really interesting dynamic.
They were laughing, and this is a man. Vladimir Putin and MBS are both two men who understand the value of optics. They would not have demonstrated this show of friendship and bromance if they had not wanted to. It's certainly a signal that alliance is stronger than ever.
And you remember the way Putin would speak with body language when he met with Obama? I mean, it was more important what they were actually saying.
Yeah, everything is deliberate. And even in the case of MBS, we saw one of his aides, I don't know if we have the picture, but one of MBS's closest advisors, the Turkish delegation, both confronting Trump, presumably talking about the Khashoggi incident. And we're seeing this picture now as they're starting to, perhaps lay the groundwork for a meeting later on. The president, turns out, did actually talk to MBS, guys. Here's what he said, though, about the extent of that conversation.
We had no We might, but we have not. Thank you very much.
Nothing to see here.
Yeah. So what's he exactly saying there, Devin? Because I had a hard time. I mean,
no discussion.
No discussion.
There's nothing to see here.
Just talked but not discussed.
We talked but didn't discuss.
Okay. All right. Okay.
A distinction without a difference. What were you saying about Clintonian? All right, moving on. There was some history made this morning, quite a big development this morning that didn't get a lot of coverage, with the president throughout NAFTA. He inked a deal with two of his arch rivals in North America, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the outgoing Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto. On his last day in office, they met this morning. They signed the deal, guys, and this was certainly one of President Trump's biggest campaign promises, John. And even though it hasn't cleared Congress yet, I think you can chalk this one up as a win.
Yeah, it needs to clear Congress, so let's not chalk it to win
big
yet.
Caveat.
But it's interesting. It's, you know, I've heard this described as not really NAFTA 2.0. It's really NAFTA 1.2 or 3. It's
like 90% NAFTA.
It keeps almost all of NAFTA in place. There are some significant changes, though, and changes that will satisfy some Democrats. I mean, you know, in terms of labor standards, the percentage of cars manufactured in North America that must be made by laborers making at least is it $15 an hour?
$16 an hour in Mexico. That's going to help.
It's a big deal in terms of the auto industry. So I think that the bigger victory here would be for those that are in favor of not trashing the entire international trade system. You remember Steve Bannon pushed very hard to simply eliminate NAFTA. That was not done. So you have a deal that now has Trump's support, Trump's name on it, that actually keeps NAFTA essentially in place.
But let's just return to the policy dynamics going forward in Congress. Congress is not likely to get to approving this deal by the end of the year, which means it's going to be next year when the House is overcome by Democrats. And that's going to make it a lot more difficult, as John was saying. A lot of Democrats actually like this plan, a lot of labor Democrats in the Midwest.
They like it more than NAFTA. They might not like everything in the plan, but it is an improvement from NAFTA.
And that's going to help passage of this, but it's going to be more complicated, undoubtedly, than it would be by the end of this year.
And Democrats are going to push for changes, which, as you know, when you have a three-part, I mean, how are you going to do that?
And they're not allowed to make changes under the fast-track authority. We won't get into the weeds if you're not an NAFTA expert, though. But there are two housekeeping items we ought to button up on this. You know, John, the president, you and I were talking, the president had long said that redoing NAFTA was going to be his way of getting Mexico to pay for the border wall. We're about to have a shutdown over the border wall. You've been asking officials, did they extract anything out of it?
You talked to Lighthizer, who is the president's chief trade negotiator.
I did talk to the trade rep. I asked Robert Lighthizer several different ways from Sunday if they have figured out how to extract funds, and he said, hey, I'm just the trade guy. I don't do walls.
But didn't you also ask, or didn't you guys also ask whether or not they had actually talked about the wall in these negotiations?
And we did. We said, have you
what did he say?
even discussed the issue of the Mexican border wall? No answer. Next question.
So not a no, not a yes.
Not a no, not a yes, not even a no comment. Move on to the next guy. So I think that was hanging out there. All right, finally, we will be here tomorrow enjoying the beautiful springtime weather down here in the Southern Hemisphere for the big event of the summit, which is, as you've been following, Allie, President Trump's dinner with Xi Jinping of China, the trade war front and center here.
Yeah, administration officials feel that this is the last best hope for Trump and Xi to meet and talk about a way to dial down tensions between the two countries and these tariffs that have been escalating on both sides. And President Trump talked about this right before he left for Argentina, saying that he thought they could make a deal, but he wasn't really sure. He absolutely hedged his bets. So going into this, it's going to be a long dinner. So who knows what happens at the end of it?
So the stakes, I mean, this could be the most important thing of this entire
stakes, as in the Argentinian steaks? Are going to have beef,
the
or are they
steaks, yeah.
They're known for their beef down
They
here
are
in
absolutely known for their, and their Malbec.
And their Malbec. All right, well, we wouldn't know.
Okay, no.
But finally today, a special series here on the Briefing Room on Fridays that we are launching, that Allie Rogan here with us now is launching. Allie, tell us about this series that looks at presidents who used to serve in the Senate. We're going back to Washington with this when you went up to Capitol Hill and took a look at some of these old Senate offices where American presidents...
Yeah, exactly. There's so much history in this building that we take for granted every day in the U.S. Congress, and there are plaques that you can visit at each of these offices. So we're visiting all the offices that presidents who were previously senators occupied when they were really starting out or in the middle of their careers.
No James Garfield? You're not doing the House?
Well, that's a next series.
Okay,
but we're starting with the Senate first.
Is that today?
Yes.
Today
is Harry Truman.
All right, let's take a look.
One of the coolest parts of covering Congress is the fact that there's history everywhere you turn. In fact, 6 senators worked in these very hallways before they moved into the Oval Office. We're taking you inside to see what it was like before they became president. office of Senator Roy Blunt. This used to be Harry Truman's office, and what a treat we have Senator Blunt here with us. And he's going to tell us about some of the amazing history in this room. Senator, we are actually standing in the office that used to belong to then Senator Harry Truman, and you were telling me he was here for 8
of the 10 years he was in the Senate.
Yeah.
And it's not an office that automatically goes with the state, but just an office really lucky for a Missourian to have. So Truman was here for 8 years. That's a picture of him standing right there in front of this window at his pretty piled high desk. And he also worked here the 82 days he was vice president. He was working here as vice president the day he became president. He was actually president while he was working here. He just didn't know it yet. And he went over late afternoon to have a drink with Sam Rayburn, the Speaker of the House, passed a note in, you need to come to the White House, something has happened. And lots of things were happening in April of 1945. It just happened that day. What happened was he had become president. And the first thing he did the next morning when he was president was come back here to clean out his desk. So here's a picture. I think this was probably when Harry Truman used this the first 2 years, not in this office, but it's his first coming to the Senate. And Vice President John Nance Garner, who was FDR's vice president the first 2 terms, somehow had managed to get possession of a couple of Jesse James's guns. And so it looks like he's about to shoot freshman Senator Harry Truman, but what he's really doing is showing him two guns of that famous Missouri outlaw.
So my thanks to Senator Roy Blunt for giving me that tour. And next Friday, tune into the briefing room, and I will give a tour of LBJ's first office when he came to the Senate before he became Senate Majority Leader.
Who has it now?
Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, Republican. And you can find extended versions of those tours online. I will tweet out the links. I'm at Allie ABC News.
All right, fantastic. Great to have you here with us. Our thanks to Chief White House Correspondent Jonathan Karl for being here as well. Much more from John coming up on World News Tonight. And you can follow John's reporting here on ABC News Live tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. World News Prime airs then on all your devices. Apple TV, Roku, Hulu, you name it. We got it for you here at ABC News. Thanks for watching us here in the briefing room. We'll be back on Monday, 3:30 Eastern Time, back in D.C. Until then, have a great weekend. I'm Devin Dwyer.